think the healthiest country in Europe is Finland. Now, if we were to match what it would take to be as healthy or as active as Finland, is the most active like-for-like nation in Europe, it would cost us significantly less than any other country because our infrastructure is so well catered for already. So the investment versus the output is so much smaller. It's just getting heard.
Welcome to this week's Escape Your Limits podcast. Today's guest is one of the most experienced and influential people in the UK fitness industry, responsible for driving forward professional standards and creating an industry that attracts and retains the best talent through the provision of lifelong career pathways and professional development opportunities. Having established CIMSPA as a core systems partner in the delivery of Sport England's 10-year Uniting the Movement strategy, our guest is fully committed to working with government and supporting the sector's collective ambition to get more people more active more often.
There have been very, very few industries since the war, the Second World War, that have been given Privy Council status, and our sector was given that status in 2012. And you know what, that's a big deal. CIMSPA, we're a neutral organisation that upholds standards and supports the workforce. So we have a challenge. We have a real challenge, and we've raised it with government. The way that we're measured as a sector is woefully out of date and woefully inaccurate.
So I'm delighted to welcome Tara Dillon to this week's Escape Your Limits podcast. Tara Dillon, thank you very much for joining us on the Escape Your Limits podcast today.
Hi, Matthew. Thanks very much for having me. It's great to be on.
Well, we're here to talk a bit about CIMSPA. It's a name that I've heard a lot about in the industry for quite a number of years. I remember when the name sort of came on my agenda, I guess. And but I thought it would be a good place to start for me and anyone that's listening, really, is to explain who is CIMSPA and what do they do?
That's a very good question. CIMSPA is the professional body for workforce in leisure, fitness, and health. And we're actually only about 10 years old. We're an amalgamation of two predecessor organisations that we kind of knew a lot about in the 80s and 90s, ISRM and ILAM, and they kind of came together and merged a little bit bumpily. And it was quiet for a while. And then the sector itself said, look, we need a professional body showcasing and profiling the workforce and the brilliant people within it, whilst also tackling a slight issue, which is training standards differ pretty starkly at the time. And it was, you know, in a sector that was enjoying its peak really 10, 15 years ago. And we're talking about a pivot to health every day here, but the pivot to health has been going on most of my career, which is 30 odd years long. But it was about having a reputation where we could stand shoulder to shoulder with allied health professions, for example. Health get what we do. And, you know, I remember somebody saying if you know, an active lifestyle was a pill in a bottle, it would outsell all other pharma because of what it can achieve. But we don't get you and your workforce and your people. So healthcare professionals wishing to refer to a fitness professional was unnerving for them. And they all have chartered institutes. So in any profession, if you think about what we all do for a living, Matthew, you think about running a club. If you're a GM in a club, you have to be an expert in HR, and there's a chartered institute for that. And you have to be an expert in marketing, there's a chartered institute for that, and health and safety and finance, and so it goes on. And there's a chartered institute for all of the skills that we need to run clubs and run businesses, and yet we didn't have one for ourselves. And the sector kind of got together a bunch of pretty, strong leaders in the sector and said, we need this sorting and it needs to be CIMSPA's role. So that was about 9-10 years ago. When I took it on, I think we had about 979 members at the time. I had about 6 members of staff, and £0 in the bank. But the good news was that the sector asked for it. So in terms of market research and market penetration, it was, you have a big gap to fill. Can you help us out so we can employ better people, keep them for longer, attract talent into the industry, and really showcase just, how polished and professional we are. And, you fast forward 9.5 years later since I took it on, and we now have 25,000 members and, quite a few bob in the bank and almost 90 staff, and really hitting the right buttons for the sector, but importantly for other sectors who are now becoming fiercely loyal to us and stickier to us, and understanding now that we have such an enormous task to support in healthcare. So yeah, it's been a bumpy journey, but a successful one, I'm pleased to say.
With the professional body, then, you talked about this chartered status or Chartered Institute of Marketing, etc. Like how is it defined in your world? Then is it a Chartered Institute of Health and
Yes.
Wellness? How do you call yourselves?
This, the CIMSPA stands for the Chartered Institute for Management in Sport and Physical Activity. So, that's no small undertaking, Matthew. There have been very, very few industries since the Second World War, that have been given Privy Council status, and our sector was given that status in 2012. And you know what? That's a big deal. It really is. And what it enables us to do is apply status and recognition to the professionals in our sector. And I'll give an example that I've used a bit before. If you've been a qualified PT for years and you've accumulated additional learning and new skills, and you've recorded it and you've invested in yourself and you've got brilliant testimonials, and you're a really established PT, and I qualified yesterday, we both have the same status. Whereas I think with all of that experience and all of that investment into you and your clients, you should have elevated status, and I should be aspiring to be like you. And that's what Chartered does. It gives, Chartered practitioner in PT enables you to stand out with your clients and others, and basically kind of kite mark just how professional you are and how much you've invested in what you do. And that's important to individuals, to a man and woman. When we run surveys with our members, Matthew, we've all got perks and all sorts of little widgets and gadgets that add a bit of value, but absolutely, to a man and woman, the top priority, why is our membership important to you? It's status and recognition. It's being able to be recognized as somebody who's really, really put some hours into learning. And for me, it's the public perception as well. Lots of people know what chartered means in other sectors. You've heard of a chartered accountant, you've heard of a chartered surveyor. You might not know what it takes to become a chartered accountant or a chartered lawyer, surveyor, but you kind of know that that's elevated and professional, on top of your game. So for our PTs to, wear a t-shirt that says chartered practitioner in PT, that says quite a lot to people who are consuming our products and our brilliant services. And, I kind of got pretty fed up midway through my career of being misunderstood. I don't know about you. What do you do? I work in sport and physical activity, and the sort of face becomes a little bit, show us your muscles, which way's the beach, and can you have a look at my knee? For some reason, it was like associated with physio. And kind of, do you get about in a shorts and t-shirt and blow a whistle? No. And you think about what it takes to qualify as a PT or group X or fitness or whatever in our profession: anatomy, physiology, kinesiology, diet, nutrition, psychology, marketing, business. All of these things, that are pretty technical, seem to be misunderstood by the public. And yet the public are really quite happy to say, I have a PT. They like what that means, but I'm not sure they know what it means. So I think for us to really elevate this sector as a profession, I I think it's essential, and I really, really am kind of fed up with being devalued as a sector. I think we're also, and I think that was definitely why I took the job on. I won't stop until it's completely understood what a chartered practitioner is, and we get the respect that we deserve.
Introducing the next big thing in functional training, the Escape Barrow, a revolutionary training tool that combines a loaded farmer's carry with a sled push to develop hip, grip, and core strength. Developed in partnership with Pete Holman, inventor of the TRX Rip Trainer and Nautilus Glute Drive, the Escape Barrow can be rolled, pushed, dragged and carried. The Escape Barrow packs a punch with an impressive load capacity of 440 pounds, and with a 2-stage galvanized paint covering process, it's also ideal for outdoor use. So head over to escapefitness.com/barrow. That's escapefitness.com/barrow to find out more. Enjoy the rest of this episode. I think what you've mentioned there about the chartered status is definitely something I recognize in an accountant, in marketing, surveyors, etc. Though that definitely hits home. I feel, I don't know whether I'm just out of touch, but I don't think I've ever heard it used, and I probably should do, but maybe this is an example of the amount of work that's involved in pulling this off, but I've never really heard it referred to in that way. And I did quite a bit of research for this, and I never connected even the terminology of CIMSPA to Chartered Institute of Sport
Physical activity.
Activity. So, so my guess is that most of the general public, that doesn't hit or resonate with them either. And well, maybe it does. Maybe I'm just sort of out of touch a little bit.
No, I think it should, and we have every intention to ensure that brand, not brand CIMSPA, but the brand as it associates with an individual, is kind of understood like a household thing. Little story, Matthew, I don't know, probably about 7 or 8 years ago, in a conversation with Public Health England, who were on our side as a sector. They said, right, we want you to kind of go nuclear, press the public button tomorrow, and let's do a double-page spread in a Sunday newspaper and tell the world that they should be looking for chartered members or CIMSPA members. And I pushed back because at the time we were still grappling with different standards of delivery, and that's been the bit that's taken quite a bit of time. So we're not just a membership organisation, we're a regulatory organisation too. And at the centre of what we do is we set professional standards for learning in our sector. And what that means is working with the sector, what are the minimum pieces of knowledge, technical knowledge, skills and behaviours, essentially, that a PT would need to have as a minimum to go out and start their career as a PT, and to manage their expectations, in addition to be employable safely, etc. And they're not a qualification, they're standards. Then anybody who delivers those qualifications now needs to map their delivery to those minimum standards for deployment. That then earns a CIMSPA kite mark that tells employers, deployers and learners this is a good set of learning. And that took an awful long time to settle, Matthew, because then you've got a lot of training providers saying, okay, now I need to seek that kite mark. That's important. Employers and deployers needed to get used to, if I'm going to be slightly critical of our sector, there may have been a few too many employers saying, well, listen, we'll pay for it because it says it's the PT qual should be okay. And it was usually cheap, and pile them high and sell them quick, and that didn't help. So we had to go on a journey with the sector, buyer beware. You want this chartered institute, you want the profession showcasing, you want the best people, you're going to have to look for this kite mark. That's why we've done it. We're funded to do that. Any money or profits that were surplus that we generate goes back into that system. We're constantly updating and upskilling and developing new learning as well. We're not just fitness, we're in the sports sector and coaching and management and all the other jobs in our sector. Frankly, there's a lot of them. So we needed really to reset the system, and that's taken quite a few years. So I sort of pushed back to PHE and said, it's a nice idea, but if we switch that on tomorrow, the public would demand it and the sector might not be able to meet it. And I'm not sure that would have done us a whole set of favours reputationally. But fast forward to now, I think we're at that place where the public, frankly, people buying our services, another analogy I probably applies only to the UK, but if you get a gas engineer come and service your boiler and your heating, we used to say, oh, that's, they Corgi registered and now it's something else. It's a gas certificate, gas safe. The public know what that is. They don't know where it is. They don't know how big it is. They don't know what's required. It's the assurance that sector is obliged to meet. And I think our sector is equally obliged to meet expectations, because people are spending 30 quid or so a session with a PT, caring for body, soul and mind, right? So we need to know what we're talking about. So we're at that point, and you're probably going to come on to ask me later about license to practice, which is another piece of work that we're looking at and working with government on. So yes, I think the time is now so that it is understood and widely understood, and that credit and that status that many of our workforce are seeking is appreciated.
So is that, I know the last time I sort of heard of that, particularly in England, was with reps. So is the chartered taken over from where that started, or is that something totally different?
Yeah, reps, all reps members merged into CIMSPA membership 3 or 4 years ago. So CIMSPA is a member of IC Reps. We're partners with eReps. We're just not called reps anymore because it's broader than just fitness. It's broader than just exercise professionals. It's sport and physical activity professionals. So yeah, we merged successfully. All of those members, I was one. It's about 4 years ago this month. So yeah, it's the same thing.
Right. And I guess with that, it started to try and do a similar thing, I suppose. And when you the way you explained it in terms of what a PT does, you kind of think there's a lot in their hands, really. We obviously, you referred to the Corgi and the gas man and fixing your boiler, which I guess, if your boiler goes wrong, you can blow up your house. So I guess it's quite a serious thing. But when people are working with your body on a number of different levels, if you don't know what you're doing, there are other consequences. So I suppose it seems like a great idea to be able to say, oh, okay, look, there's thousands of trainers there. Some of them have been through certifications, some of them haven't, some of them keep it up, some of them don't. So I suppose I can see the benefit for the general public to say, oh, okay, well, this person is definitely Corgi approved, as you say. So that will guide my decisions to have somebody that I know at least understands what they're doing. Because it does seem, from an outsider's perspective, that it's still a little bit Wild West. And I guess some of the things I wanted to come on to in a minute, in terms of even like government taking us seriously, you can kind of understand why that probably isn't happening, because it's very difficult to define quality and standards, really. And the fact that this organization is only 10 years old sort of, I suppose, shows how new this whole thing is, really.
Yeah, but basically, I think you're reiterating my point. It is serious stuff, and we, by and large, individuals working in our profession are just that. They're very professional and they take it very seriously. There are people who I'm not going to name it, but I've used a couple of gyms where my PT is a CIMSPA member, and therefore he stands out as suitably qualified, competent, and safe. And I see others who I don't believe are qualified. They just turned a hobby into a job. Kind of, I kind of know what I'm doing. I can kind of write a program because one's been written for me. I kind of, CrossFit's my hobby or whatever it is. I'm good at functional fitness, and off I go and call myself a PT. And I just don't think that's okay, Matthew. I don't think that's fair to the people who have worked very hard to be qualified and maintain their competence and stay up to speed and invest in themselves and therefore their clients. For somebody just to say, hey, I call myself a PT and that's okay. You can't call yourself a gas engineer. It's going back to meeting that obligation as well, Matthew. You and I get on a plane. I assume the pilot knows what they're doing. We're going to a GP. I don't check they're qualified. I know there is a body, and I know there is some sort of regulation, and there are some criteria that those professionals have to meet and maintain. And I wouldn't really want to go to somebody who's not qualified. In fact, we wouldn't dream of it, would we? So it goes back to that point. I mean, the public bit is twofold for me. I really, really don't want to apply a stick approach to people. That's kind of not who CIMSPA are. CIMSPA we're a neutral organisation that upholds standards and supports the workforce. That's primarily what we do. But there is a serious side to us, which is, hey, listen, if you don't meet the standard, it's not okay. Because, for the reasons that you've just described, it's pretty serious stuff. Taking care of and being accountable to people's well-being physically and mentally, and you're not qualified to do it. But also, reputationally as a sector, we kind of need to own that. Just say, that's how we do things around here, because without it, when we're struggling to convince government departments or allied professions that we are a serious sector, and yet we can't really be bothered to uphold standards, we're just not going to stand shoulder. We're never, ever going to meet those expectations. And so we have a responsibility, I think, as a sector. I've been in this sector for 36 years, which is ridiculous. And it's got better and better and better. But we need to be more formal if we're going to be taken more seriously. And that, we get chartered status, we've got a professional body, we've got other organisations in this sector who've really, really stepped up to protect it, uphold it, and showcase it. It's really important that the entire sector works on that journey. And I have to say, Matthew, by and large, they do. There are a lot of startups out there, and we've got to make sure that we're heard, seen, understood, and supportive. But equally, that serious side of us needs to tell the public, without seeing that person, you need to check whether or not that person is qualified.
There's a lot of work I know that people like yourself, UK Active, and others, many organisations have lobbied to the government to, I guess, take this space seriously in terms of health issues and being part of the solution. And it seems to be very slow. I know there's some initiatives that are out there which I'll come on to, but it certainly seems as though it's slow, and there doesn't seem to be maybe acceptance is the wrong word, but there doesn't seem to be an integration into the ever-growing issue that we've got in terms of health-related issues, and the government looking at the industry and a lot of people that work into it as being a really essential part of the solution. Do you think partly that is really what you guys are hoping to achieve, to allow that to happen like it does in other areas, or are there other things there that means that they're just a lot more cautious about diving and saying, okay, well, this is an important part in the whole thing?
Well, I think it's a combination of things, Matthew. I think it's partly our fault as a sector, and I'll explain that to you in a second. But government is a complex setup, and it has been very, very hard to crack through this sort of resistance to. They listen, but they don't hear often the power of our sector. And that's where we're probably at fault a little bit as a sector, because we have spoken with multiple voices into government over the years, and we need to be more mature than that. We need to collaborate better, speak with one voice, and there's a huge amount of progress there, and I'll explain that to you in a sec. But also we need strong evidence base with problem statement that the government has, with a strong set of evidence, data-based evidence that provides an immediate solution to that problem. Government, you can talk to manifestos, you can talk to long-term plans, you can talk to pledges all day long. Problem solving for government is what gets heard. And we've got masses and masses and masses of data, but it's in so many different areas, and it needs to be in one central repository that says, ask us a question, we'll provide the evidence, we'll provide a solution, and you will take us more seriously, and keep that momentum up. So there's two bits going on, which I'm pleased with. We're part of it. You mentioned a couple, CIMSPA and UK Active, but during COVID, Matthew, the people like me, CEOs and CEO of UK Active and CEO of Sport England and other organisations, we met every night after 5 o'clock, after the Prime Minister or the CMO made an announcement about, latest rules. And we all agreed who was going to do what, right? Okay, so it's workforce, so I'll get that on our website. And UK Active, you go and get the sort of rules on gyms out, and Sport England, you go and talk about money and all of the initiatives. And we were coordinated and we collaborated well. We were clear. We weren't duplicating. And, we got to the end of that and said, well, collaboration is not such a bad thing. Who knew? We should do more of this. So we kind of stayed together. We created this group called the National Sector Partners Group, which is the local government authority, UK Active, SRA, CIMSPA, active partnerships and so on. And so we meet twice a month. We wrote a paper for government called Unlocking the Potential last year that says short, medium and long-term impacts that this sector could have if government were to, we don't need to necessarily invest, they just need to listen and help us connect with the right departments where we're going to have the greatest impact. So, for example, Department of Health and Social Care, DLUC, BFE, etc. And that's working. We are starting just to chip away finally, and it's been welcomed by government because they're saying, thank God for that. You guys are speaking with one voice now. There's some clarity about your ask. There's some clarity. And so DCMS is our sponsor department as a sector, and their kind of quid pro quo is, listen, if you deliver it like this, we can go and say it like that for you. The tricky bit, ultimately, Matthew, is the Treasury. If you need investment, getting into the Treasury is like getting into somewhere very difficult to get into.
Why? For what reason? So
okay, so this is about size of the sector and value added, basically. So we have a challenge. We have a real challenge, and we've raised it with government. The way that we're measured as a sector is woefully out of date and woefully inaccurate. So government use ONS data.
What is that?
Office for National Statistics data. And there's some classifications within there. This is really techy and boring, but I'll do it anyway. SIC codes and SOC codes, so industry codes and occupational codes. And a lot of our sector sits in a different code. So let me give you an example. Nuffield, which is a huge operator in our sector, having huge impact and has a huge economic impact as well as social and health impact, is classified in the health code, not in the fitness code. And yet it's a fitness operator. Then there are masses and masses and masses of gyms out there that are classified in hospitality. There are thousands and thousands of gyms that aren't registered as a gym. There's loads of community organisations that don't feature in our subcode. So we think, CIMSPA's estimation, we fed this into government, is we think we're underestimated by about 41%. So we're almost twice the size. And you have to be a certain size to resonate with Treasury. Okay, well, listen, you want an ask, you want us to do something, or you want some help. But you're not anywhere near as big as hospitality that drives a huge tax revenue into our Treasury. So we look too small and too insignificant. That's just tax revenue. And I think we're twice the size of that. But there's also social value, health value, as well as economic value. And what we've got to get better at as a sector is making that point in a much, much clearer and mature way. We need to understand what's going to make Treasury tick. And we need to collect that evidence in a much more mature way, which is collaborating. And look, I'm sounding like I'm having a go at the sector that I've been in for 36 years and I love. I'm not. We are getting so much better at it. But we really have to learn how to not play the game, oil the wheels, really, oil the cogs within government. There is a way, and doing the same thing in the same way that we've done for years hasn't worked. We just need to hold a mirror up and say, okay, data is key. So let's look at a problem statement. I was thinking about this. I was on several meetings today and talked about this. I mean, talk about stating the obvious, right? You, me, other industry people have been talking about this for 30 years. If I draw a line along here, and this is the health sector, right? So we've got a Secretary of State for Health, should be called the Secretary of State for the Sick, because clearly that's all they do. They look after the health service. I know that where's the genuine health prevention service in the Department for Health and Social Care? If you were on this line that I've just sort of drawn, I'm trying to make it fit in the screen. If you just split it in half, this bit over here is the National Health Service. And that's probably where the lion's share of all healthcare spend goes, which is into healing the sick, right? And I acknowledge that some people are just born ill, get ill, whatever. Now, if you were to stretch the line back this way, where there is very little investment, this is called health. This is called sick. The health bit is funded through hope. We hope for health in this country. We hope that people adopt a healthier lifestyle. We hope that people understand and are educated to understand that a healthier lifestyle includes being a bit more active and being careful with what you eat. You don't have to be, eating lettuce all the time, but just be knowledgeable. And then you get somewhere in the middle here. And people who, are sat in lower socio-economic groups will tap into this side a lot earlier and become a lot more expensive. And there's a big bit in the middle that's 100% preventable. So this spend over here can be dramatically reinvested, not reduced. I don't believe in reducing healthcare spend. I believe in being more efficient with it. Could be significantly better spent and reinvested if there was a bit more attention over here. And that's where we've got to be more mature as a sector. We've got evidence to make the point here that an active life will prevent this cohort of people ending up in this side of it. I've got the mirroring right now. I need a pen. Fogging up and costing the fortune. That's, and everyone talks about it. We'll pivot to health. We're moving from fitness, and we're not using the word leisure anymore. And I agree with that. We can't use the word leisure anymore. It's banned in my organisation. But the pivot to health happened years ago, proving our worth into Treasury, into Department of Health, into other government departments is our job now. And
when you say proving it, is that more of a case of proving it in the ways playing by the rules that the government works by? Because as opposed to, because it's clear there's no shortage of research, even on an extremely basic level, that a lot of just simple things, as you referred to, movement, etc. There's not a shortage of very, very good extensive research studies out there that demonstrates that. But I guess, is that not necessarily what they're looking for? Are they looking for a better way to understand what the sector is doing, which, from what you've said earlier, is also very undefined, because it's a number of different things and not categorized in the same way? Is that more the challenge, rather than demonstrating that if you do this, this is going to reduce people going the other side of the line?
I think there's been a mixed view of who we are. So I think sport is sport, and I think governments see that as something we watch on the telly, and it's great, and people win medals and championships, and it's good for the soul, and let's hope everybody plays sport. Whereas I think there's a misunderstanding about the benefits of it, and actually a real reluctance to even consider that it started somewhere, grassroots, which needs investment. I mean, NGBs are national governing bodies for sport, do get investment, but a lot of it has to go to elite performance, and that's the top end of, whereas grassroots is, you think about where we all learned to swim, where we all learned to play footy or badminton or whatever. It was either at school or it was in a leisure centre. There, I said the leisure centre word, and that's a sports centre. But then what happens is the view is, oh, that's local authority. So we've got sport bracketed over here. Then we've got local authority, that's a service you provide, which is up there with libraries and bin collection. You have to do that. You have to be able to afford it. And then there's fitness, which is seen very much through, I mean, I'm probably being a bit disingenuous to the government here, but there's also fitness, the private sector, that is viewed as a high street retail service, right? Because we seem to have got that right. And, a couple of fantastic gym operators are in the FTSE 100, and therefore it's something else. Whereas actually, we're all doing this together. And it's not 3 different things or 4 different things, community sport, or that's, well-intended volunteers doing the right thing in their community. You've got no idea what, and that is it's the reciprocity thing, I think, Matthew. If we were to take any part of those bits out of society, out of the system, this government is what you can expect to see and have to pay for. And it's almost turning the argument around, saying, listen to us, because we keep people active. There are 30,000 or million or something like that GP visits reduced a year. If I were government, I'd go, good, that sounds good, keep up the good work. Because we're not saying, and therefore, if you invest in us or we create more of that, we could make that 60. We don't finish the sentence off, Matthew. And what we should be saying is, hey, keep investing and understanding, supporting and raising the profile of this sector by allowing us to work in partnership with the National Health Service to ensure that people coming into their system are at first encouraged to come into our system, to hopefully stop them going back into the system. That's it. It's not money, it's process. Now, if we were to do that through these different various factions that I just discussed, that's where you get your 30,000 GP visits reduced. Take it away and ignore us, see what happens then. So I think I love the NHS. I think it's a fantastic thing. The people who work in it are extraordinary. But let's face it, it's broken. It's a creaking point.
Yeah, that's right.
And there's no more money, right?
It seems to have got worse since I was back in the. I broke my finger in the sort of summertime, and I went to the doctors in the hospital, and it seemed to have been a totally different place post the pandemic. It was just, and nothing to do with the people that are working in it. It was just like a third world experience, literally. Just
so imagine if we, I mean, that's different. You broke your finger and people get sick. I get that.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I just thought, I'm just so glad I'm not really sick, because it would, like, having to go through that all the time, it would just be terrible.
Well, ambulance waiting times are just terrible, all-time high. The A&E waiting times, very few trusts are hitting their targets, and it's not because the staff aren't trying. Of course they are. I mean, it just, as I said, an extraordinary bunch of people who do extraordinary things, and thank goodness they're there. But they're full. The waiting list for operations, I think it's probably got something to do with the pandemic and catching up, but nevertheless, you can keep in, this is I'd love to get in front of Jeremy Hunt and say, don't build another hospital or buy another CT scanner for that hospital or do anything. Just have a look at what you can do. Have a look at how many people are occupying beds or occupying GP services or getting into ambulances, and do the maths. Work out how many of those people, as we get older, as society's grown, there's something like 9 times as many people are going to have long-term preventable health conditions that are going to go into an already clogged up system. 9 times as many people. And yet the Department of Health has still not turned its head and said, what do we do to prevent that from happening? And to whom do we turn? And I absolutely assure everybody who listens to this, I know sometimes CIMSPA and UK Active and others get really criticised for not making a dent, apparently, into government. It is daily. It's relentless. Our attack, it's a terrible word to use, our relentless infiltration into government. Please hear, please hear, please hear, please hear. It is cracking, I promise. But, just turn your head, Department of Health and Social Care. And if you know that that's coming, what the hell are you going to do to prevent it? And there are 14 non-communicable, preventable diseases that we are sat here waiting to help you avoid. And that might be a campaign encouraging people to go to the local centre or to join a PT or to join a club, or we'll have a look at other countries that have, look at you guys in the States. You and I were talking about Newport Beach earlier. I can rock up at a gym for free on the beach, whatever. Every other country seems to have invested in it. I think the healthiest country in Europe is Finland. Now, if we were to match what it would take to be as healthy or as active as Finland, is the most active like-for-like nation in Europe, it would cost us significantly less than any other country because our infrastructure is so well catered for already. So the investment versus the output is so much smaller. It's just getting hurt.
Coming up next.
We don't want to duplicate what health's doing. We want to complement what health's doing. I know AI is coming and we must embrace it, etc. But currently, all centres around people, and people love people. All the evidence suggests it's the people that attract the people, not the kit. 99% of coaches are brilliant at what they do, and yet a small group of unsavoury characters are bringing the reputation of the sector down, and I want to see them out.
Do you think that there's like a lack of trust because of the reasons that you've said? Because it's like, well, what is the fitness sector? Oh, well, it's a retail business that give people 6-packs and that type of thing, as opposed to it really understanding that it's more about health and wellness. Do you think that is, and with you guys now, is there a high level of trust in terms of what people like yourself and UK Active, and I know there's a number of others out there, that the government really take you seriously and trust you, or is it like a bit of those guys, they're the fitness and sport people?
Yeah. Let's cheer this podcast up a little bit, because I've just been a little bit critical of the whole world. It genuinely is, Matthew. I've seen such a change in the last 2 years of organisations sitting up and listening, government departments sitting up and listening. A significant shift, and we just need to keep on with that momentum. So let me give you an example of some of the work we're doing. And this isn't just showcasing CIMSPA, this is working. This is genuinely working. So I think one of the challenges we may have had as a sector is we've fed into government and other organisations that need to listen to us pretty big figures without enough narrative and story. Do you know what I mean? So we talk about £13 billion a year GVA. Is that big? Is that good? Is that significant? Is that anything like retail? I don't know. And social values, 20 million, and it's £4 a head. Is that, if you speak to a politician, Matthew, I don't know many, hopefully, and say, hey, how does that grab you? I don't think many of them can explain what social value is. So I'm not sure we're telling the story, but if we convert that and we know how we break it down and we know how we got there, in your constituency, member for parliament, that means 1,500 people who are pre-diabetic not becoming diabetic a year. And that costs, if they were to become diabetic, £100,000 or £100 million, whatever it is. 5,000 more children more active in your ward will mean 5,000 children arriving at school who are not obese, who have an active lifestyle, who develop active habits, who in the future, where we're going to see 9 times as many people clogging up the system, probably should be 6 times. And so it goes on. So what we've decided, and lots of organisations are doing this, I'm pleased to say, and government are recognising this too, Matthew, is place-based is more powerful than anything else. Because, so we're going
place-based.
So instead of trying to do everything universally, we're going into each county and working with the local authority, the local health trust, the local education providers, and local health and fitness employers. We're understanding from the local authority, what are your priorities? You know, some of them are fixing the potholes in the road. Some of them is, you know, increasing transport services or whatever. But all of them have got health priorities. So it differs from one end of the country to another. You know, in Birmingham, for example, there's a higher propensity for diabetes in men. In certain other wards, there's slips, trips, and falls everywhere. Mental health is the mental health budget's creaking. So it's diabetes, falls prevention, cancer prehab, cardiac rehab, blah, 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 right? Stroke. They're the biggest cost, they're the biggest priorities. We get people in a room who knew collaboration works. And then the local providers, the employers, whether it's local authority or private, say, hey, did you know that we ran cancer prehab classes? Health Trust says, no. This is fantastic news. What does that do? Well, it reduces 8 bed days per cancer patient post-op. And the trust is saying, this is fantastic evidence. This will save us a fortune, which means that we can, right? So then you get this chain reaction. And then we say, okay, well, if we were to do more of that, what other skills would you like to see? Well, we'd like to see. So CIMSPA then facilitates and says we need this many occupations with these new types of skills. We go to the local college and say, can you provide them? Because what you're providing is okay, but it's not really making people work ready. If you provide this curricula, not only is the person going to get a job at the end of it straight away, but they're going to get a job that's going to make a difference to that place and that community that's measurable and impactful. That college gets funded fully by government because the Post-16 Skills Act says that all Post-16 college, the Adult Education Act talks about employer-led curriculum as opposed to we're just putting out a sports course. And that they have to show evidence that there's a local employer need for it. So this is place-based too. Now, inject all of that into a place, Matthew, and then write that evidence down. How much richer is that local impact, local value, local social, economic, tackling inequalities, tackling health inequalities, build a community that's more active, etc., etc. That's powerful data. That's extraordinary data. Now, and so if we've been tackling it into central government and they're not hearing it, and they point it straight back out to that's a local authority issue, why not go straight to the local authority then?
And do they listen when you with those types of arguments? So
Yeah,
is there They are. Okay,
Yes.
that's good.
We've been doing it a year, and listen, thanks to Sport England, because they've invested in this. They've invested 2.5 million so that we can build a team and an infrastructure that goes out and facilitates and supports it. So we've got a person in each area that brings all of these agencies together. And I actually thought it might be knocking heads together, but it's not. It's very collaborative, and there's very much in listening and support mode. And then each one of those areas has what was called a local skills improvement plan and a local skills advisory board, and it's unique to that place. So, we're sourcing learners that are representative of the community that they live in, which is fantastic for equality and diversity. It's more conducive because people are more associated with that place. The priorities are very, very specific. So the impact is quicker and more measurable, and the data therefore richer. So there's not much not to love about this ecosystem, and it is working, and it's been very, very welcome. So we've set up in about 23 already, and we were kind of looking at doing about half that, but the demand for it is overwhelming. Local Government Association have got it, District Council Network have got it, ICTs, Integrated Care Trusts, are now sort of sharing with each other. This is a good thing. Government are sort of, ensuring that the education part of it is funded. So yeah, those mini ecosystems, we become some of our parts, and then I think we'll get heard. I really do.
How do you think education providers can, it sounds like you've got to understand the system and how the whole thing falls down. Like you mentioned trips and falls. We had a gentleman on a few weeks ago, Dan Metcalf, that's over here. He was doing a lot of very simple stuff with people that are 60 and above, connecting balance, brain, movement, really simple stuff. But the short of the story was that as people get older, they don't want to leave the ground because they're worried about falling over, and so they lose a lot of the key motor skills required. And yourself, I don't know what the percentage was, he said, but if someone has a fall, breaks a hip, it's pretty much over, particularly depending on where you go. So the cost of dealing with that, and then kind of what the ongoing care needs to be for something that's pretty preventable must be huge. And so he's got this great, he's got a whole curriculum around just simple movements that you can do. And it's having a massive effect on people, because not only are they strong enough to prevent a lot of those falls, but there's a lot of mental reconnections of the brain because of a lot of the movement. So it seems as though developing a program like that, training trainers, putting it into clubs or local authority centers would not only create a whole new opportunity from a business, from a commercial perspective, but also it would have huge benefit from like local authorities and reducing the amount of patients that come in because they're falling. So I suppose, how do you look at things when because you're obviously working with a lot of training organizations, and I'm sure that interesting courses and workshops that are being developed, but are you guys sort of giving frameworks to say, well, think about when you're developing anything, how that could fit into more of a bigger strategic vision?
Yeah, we are. Because going back to those little ecosystems I talked to you about, once we've established the priorities, we then work with the local authority or employers or the health trusts. We identify these occupational skills that require. It's like a training needs analysis. If we had all of these people, these skills here, we could tackle that. And then we play that back to our training provider partners and further and higher education partners and say, develop that. and also, it's that, I said to you earlier about the shift that I've seen in the last 2 years, that evidence, I haven't seen that level of evidence or that level of demand ever in my career. So what I would see previously is, can we have more fitness instructors? Can we have more lifeguards? Can we do a little bit around, I don't know, strength and conditioning? It's all a bit samey, Matthew. Now what I'm seeing is long-term health conditions, long COVID, understanding falls prevention, rehabilitation, recovery, diet, nutrition, mental health. There's masses of much more health specific, health oriented asks that are not insurmountable, not beyond the realms. We have to be careful not to be mindful that a healthcare professional starts here, so a fitness professional needs to finish there. We don't want to duplicate what health's doing, we want to complement what health's doing. But that evidence, I'm presenting this evidence at an event next week or the week after. That's very, very powerful. And if anything, what we might struggle with actually is the number of providers that can shift quickly, have the agility to say, okay, well, that's pretty technical, but we can work with Health Education England, who are more than happy to support in this space. So, and it works both ways. They want to know more about active lifestyles because they know a lot about medicine, and we'd like to know a bit about medicine, and we'll, tell you a bit more about active lifestyles. So that's working as I can't remember what the scheme's called, Moving More, Living More, I think. But there's some sort of reciprocal arrangement between health and fitness, health as in the medical side. So yeah, we are feeding it in, and it is growing. But listen, you made another really good point there about the power of that. This guy understanding it, and this guy, we've got this sales pitch slightly wrong as well, going back to this maturation of the sector. And this is the other shift I've seen, a real understanding. Listen, if you'd never heard of fitness, this is the other thing that amazes me, right? It really winds me up. If I stop 12 people on the street now and say, hey, did you know that being a little bit more active or a decent diet is going to be good for your health? We're going to struggle to find 12 people who go, or anybody goes, oh, no, I didn't know that. Of course they didn't know that, right? So that's not a hard sell, is it? But our image for far too long has been, but only for some. It's only for super weirdos who are prepared to get out. And it's a very harsh thing to say, because I used to be one of them who gets up at 5 o'clock in the morning, goes to the gym, and wouldn't dream of missing a daily workout and all this sort of stuff. I don't do that anymore. I'm too old. But I consume fitness now because I don't want to fall over when I'm older. I want my core to be strong enough. I want my body to be strong enough to withstand it. I'm a 54-year-old woman, so therefore menopausal, I've gone through the menopause, but lots of menopausal women become very brittle because of osteoarthritis, which is an unfortunate byproduct, if you like, or symptom of menopause. And therefore I am more likely to break something than you are if we're the same age. So I need to protect against that. Our image is only young, fit, and healthy people can utilize or consume our services. That's been the case.
Well, it's not just the image, Tara. If you look at a lot of the data in terms of where the majority of fitness businesses tend to focus and where the opportunity are consistently, it is with the younger. And I'm not saying it's good or bad, because that it is what it is. But I think the image is a correct reflection of what's happening. Where when we have a lot of people on the podcast, and it's really tapping into the Gen Ys and Gen Zs, and that's really the goal. And I'm not saying that's not a good thing to do, but I guess the opportunity, the market is huge, as there are a vast number of different demographics to go after with very different and specific needs. And I think that fitness, that six-pack abs, that round sort of peachy butt or whatever is a message for certain demographic. But then what is it when you're in your 50s, 60s, and 70s? Because as you say, the requirements are different. So how do you tell a different story? And I think it's a one size fits all still, very much.
I think it is. But, and I accept that, that there is a market for young people. Of course there is. But if that's our only focus, then we just got lazy, right? So we've got this, rather dull statistic that we used to be proud of. Now we're not, a persistent 13% population penetration rate for clubs. I mean, that's nothing to be proud of, right? So there's 87% of the population aren't using us. Why is that? Could be because of our image issue. But it's the sell. Matthew, we're not selling six packs. We're selling balance, and we're selling diet and nutrition and well-being. And if I stopped any of those 12 people and said, hey, did you know that slightly active lifestyle was good for you, they would all say yes. If I stopped 12 people and said, hey, I can almost guarantee you live longer, are you in? Yeah. Okay, be a bit more active. Would you like me to tell you how? I mean, that's kind of it, right? That's the pitch. And here is the range of our services. So it's not just six packs and functional fitness gyms that all look a bit urban and funky. It's about me selling or advising or guiding or practicing, going back to chartered practitioners and general practitioners and physical practitioners and all the other things that we need to tailor a healthy lifestyle. And that's not always in a gym.
No. Do you also think, as like it's a lot different in America, more noticeable in England, and I'm not saying that this doesn't happen in England, but in America, there's a lot of people that help, a lot of professionals that are in their 50s, 60s, maybe even older. There's a lot of older people that see this as a serious career. In fact, I had a gentleman on the other day. He's in his mid 60s. He was an ex NBA player, very high level fitness trainer, and you know he's almost like an aspiration because he's a great looking chap. But I suppose you don't see that a lot in fitness centers. You don't see a lot of older people that are inspiration for you to. And also, I've been through what happens when you get older. I'm only just starting to realize that that things change when you get into your 50s. But unless you've really been through it, you just don't relate to it. You can't connect. You can't tell the story very well. So I think there's a lack of people in there that can connect and tell a different story. Would you agree? Like, you must see that a lot more than I do.
I 100% agree. We need some testimonials and some advocacy from that age group who said, I didn't, just what you've just said. Nobody told me when you hit 50, it's harder to get out of bed and, you know, and things creak and ache and all the things that you and I are going through. And goodness only knows how that would have ended up had I not joined a class, which I thoroughly enjoy on a, you know, Saturday morning, whatever, and I'm playing what, but, you know, there's another side as well. We've got to be really careful about patronizing that age group as well. You know, we used to cater for it, didn't we? Saying we'd have an over 50s class. When I was working in the leisure centre and I was a rec assistant.
Would you go to an over 50s class?
Oh, no, it feels like going on a some holiday begins with S and sounds like lager. I just wouldn't do it because it's boxing me out and it feels like I'm being written off. And we call it silver pound and the silver dollar. Stop doing that. That particular demographic is gold to this sector. It really is, because it will prove the point. And that longevity thing, that habit forming, or new to it, and it wasn't that tough, and I didn't feel intimidated because it was full of sort of 20 somethings that are all extraordinarily buff and lovely. We just, I just think we can be a bit lazy there, and I think you're right. We need more our imagery. It's not just about poster. We need a poster woman and a poster boy, like your man who you just spoke to and said, hey, I might have been in the NBA, I might have been an extraordinary footballer once upon a time, but I now do it because I've got a hip problem, or I don't have a hip. So I've got a real bad back problem, and I've had it for years because of sport, basically. Unless I'm going to the gym, it hurts. Go to the gym, it doesn't, right? So I know that. So we need more of those stories being told. And, the same with the knee. I used to play hockey. My knee's not very good. And so I have to keep moving, and I need a place to do that. I'm just telling you to suck eggs, and everybody listening understands the benefits of it.
No, but I think you've hit on something quite interesting, because I think about this a lot. I have a bad back. I have, shoulders. It just happens when you do stupid things when you're younger, and
you end up paying the price. But I also know I've thought about this a lot. I thought, okay, if there was the me that didn't understand health and fitness and didn't work out, I would probably be almost like I'd be a very different person, because I would think, oh, okay, well, because you've got that pain, you can't cure that. That's just now how you are, and that's something you're going to live with for the rest of your life. So you then would accommodate your whole life around this injury, which in some cases can be extremely painful, and you accept it, because the only way I can overcome, I know a lot of these things are very temporary. So if I know how to move and stretch and exercise, etc., then I could get rid of it in like 20 minutes. I'm back to normal. But before that point, it's you could be in a lot of pain, and you could be in a lot of pain for the whole day and the whole week and the whole month. And I just wonder how many people out there are just like that. You know, they're probably a little bit overweight to make that even worse. They're carrying too much weight. They've got all these aches and pains, which means they can't move around. And their trajectory in life, in everything from their work, from their relationships, from their sort of things they do socially, are totally different, because they can't do things. And they probably don't know, with some very simple exercise or a good trainer, you can figure that whole thing out. So when you sort of take that to the nth degree, you know, the one option is medical and operate, you know, getting it cut or taking drugs. So the other one is going and just working out. So I think we know that as an industry, but I also sometimes I don't know whether it's, you know, whether it hits home hard enough in terms of what is possible if we solve some of those problems.
Yeah, you know, and that would be a really welcome government intervention, as an education campaign that says, you know, there are things you can do. Somebody pretty close to me was pre-diabetic a few years ago, absolutely terrified, in his 60s. You know, thought he was going to lose his job, thought he was going to, all sorts, you know, read too much on the internet, thought his foot was going to be chopped, all sorts of stuff. And, you know, what do I do? And I said, okay, if you're going to go on the internet, go and have a look at a diabetic diet. That's the first thing. There's loads of stuff. I mean, go to the Association for Nutrition. They're really good at stuff like that. ACE in the States. But do some exercise. Now, here's a story for you, right? So he said, well, join a gym. Well, yeah, that would be a good start at my age. Right, well, it's only going to get worse if you don't do a bit of exercise. So, yeah. GP's not telling this person this, by the way. Me. So then came back to me, and this is a story, right? This isn't me. This is something that somebody said to me and said, your sector is bloody awful. I know, really? Why? What's happened? So this person went to 3 private gyms. One of them should have been better, but the other were, you know, one-man bands. First problem, park queue. So said he was pre-diabetic, couldn't join. Had to go back to the GP, and the GP is okay. So you know that bit. Second gym, person didn't listen. The instructor didn't listen and just gave them a standard induction and standard program. And the third one was unmanned. I said, right, okay, let me sort that out for you. I need you to eventually join the gym. Okay, but here's the habit. This guy's got a dog. Watch your dog walk that route. Time it. Don't try and race. Just do your normal walk. Time it. By the end of the month, I want you to have taken 20 seconds off it. Okay, so every day I want you to take a bit more. Yeah, did that. Are you checking with the diet? Yeah, done that. How's your timings doing? Brilliant. Okay, get a rucksack, stick some books in there. 2 weeks after that, stick a bag of flour in there, and on it goes, and try and get to that original time. Tell me how you feel. I feel loads better. I'm sleeping better. The food tastes better, even though I'm not a fan of this diet, but I kind of get it now. I've got more energy, and guess what? My bloods are looking good. So good. How do you want to maintain that? Well, I want to carry on walking. Excellent. Do you want to join a gym? No, I don't want to join a gym. Have you formed a habit? Yes. So And that person now cycles and will occasionally go to gym if they're in a hotel. Probably use a tread or a bike. So coming full circle back to what I was talking about earlier, about meeting people where they see we're at. You and I, as fitness professionals, will have been asked, I don't know how many times in our career, particularly older people who, you know, as old as me, what do you do? I'm in the fitness industry. Oh, I've got a terrible back. You wouldn't happen to know. We're still associated with that. So people understand there is a correlation between fitness as opposed to fitness, the service or the commodity or whatever, fit and wellness, and feeling better and stronger. So coming back to the brilliant people on the work in our sector, we must meet that obligation. We must meet that expectation. And I think, Matthew, coming full circle again to government and all the rest of it, just no point in waiting for people to get us. We're going to have to show people that we were worth getting. In my opinion.
Yeah. Do you think some of that's like it sounds, you know, we've come to the end of a, like you say, gone full circle, but do you think in a similar way to what you're trying to do with CIMSPA, which is to raise the standard and say, look, if you want to look for the general public, if you want to look for a trainer, or if you want to be a trainer, then the best thing for the general public and for you as a trainer is to raise that standard and to have this sort of this level of competence which will allow you and the person to get what we all know they really need.
Yes.
In whatever area that is, which is it's a very broad spectrum of needs, but essentially what you know, you're basically delivering upon a promise. And then where do you think the sort of businesses or the leisure centers and all that, do you think there's a similar way that they need to change? Because I was listening to another interview that you talked about and said, look, there's no shortage of investing in infrastructure. You know, we've got great facilities, we've got great equipment, but it's really the coaches. So what do you see the relationship between, okay, we can build a lot of these places, which we seem to be doing now, to a very high standard, but does it still come back down to the coaches and the people that are going to be sort of running this at the end of the day?
Yeah, 100%. I'm guessing you listened to a recent podcast where, and I'll say it here, if you go to Ursa or you go to Elevate or any of the trade shows and you go there the night before, our sector looks amazing, right? It's got all this kit and tech and lights and music and facilities and stadia and courts. I mean, this country is awash with good stuff. So is the States. It's amazing. But that's all it is without a person. And the person starts and the person finishes. I stand in audiences and say, how many people have got a dentist? They all put their hands up, right? How many people have had that dentist for more than 15 years? Almost everybody puts their hand up. How many people have the same hairstylist or the same GP? How often do you change? Right? You tend to stick to these professionals because you trust them. It's important to you. You're sticky to professionals. And that is so true of instructors and PTs. We've got all the evidence to say that. What made you stay in fitness? My PT. Right now, I'm not a super fan of the gym, Matthew. I'm going to put my hand up. I find it a bit dull, but that's probably because I've worked in them for 36 years and I've sort of been there, seen it, done that, trained in them. But when I do go, I still use a PT because that PT is more contemporary than I am, motivates me, checks my posture, not as strong as I used to be, corrects me, blah, blah, all the things that I need to know and be reminded of, but also hassles me. Where have you been? You missed a couple of weeks, right? Or you're away, so I'm going to write you something that you can do in a hotel, or I go off the boil, and I do, like every 6-12 weeks, I go right off and say I'm not going anymore, and I just want to take my dogs out. He'll still tell me how to take the dogs out and what hills to climb and all sorts of stuff. So it's the same, that we are motivated generally by a person in front of us. We're sticky to them. We write the programs, we design the facilities. We're the people who innovate. I know AI is coming and we must embrace it, etc. But currently, all centres around people, and people love people. And when we looked post-COVID, this is UK Active, LeisureNet, CIMSPA, we all collaborated and said, let's go and find out what's happened to the consumer. It was something like 96% of people would rejoin because of the personal coach, the PT that they had, or the Group X instructor, over where it was or how much it cost. Convenience is a big thing. There's no denying it. The inner cities have really struggled in fitness because people don't commute as much, etc., etc. So that means they're going somewhere else. I get that. But you can't ignore the fact that people motivate people, and that these facilities are nothing without a coach in front of them. So what I see is more and more organizations really understanding that their biggest asset is getting about in their gym kit. That person is on their payroll. And attracting and retaining talent is now a big priority for employers, deployers, gym chains, etc. Whereas before it was investment in kit. No amount of kit cheers me up. It's nice to go on a new bike, right, and understand how it works, but the same thing applies. Not many people like change. Don't change my kit up every 2 years. I just got used to this bike, so it's got to be well maintained, etc. But I still maintain the evidence. All the evidence suggests it's the people that attract the people, not the kit. Sorry to all your kit.
Unless it's escape equipment, that is,
Yeah, it's just absolutely brilliant.
When you hang up your boots, Tara, what do you hope to have been able to achieve at CIMSPA, so you can look back on it and say, okay, I did what I came here for?
There's two things, Matthew. The first one is, when stopped in the street and asked what we do, we say we work in fitness. I want that previous, shows your muscles, look at my knee, to be met with a raised eyebrow. How, that's pretty impressive. Well done. How do I get into it? That's the first thing. The second thing I want to have achieved is to have created a license to practice in our sector, particularly around sports coaching, to make this sector less attractive to people who are pretty unsavory, and see it as an easy place to be around vulnerable people. I don't like it. I don't like what it's doing to our reputation. We are better than that as a sector. We've got 99% of coaches are brilliant at what they do, and yet a small group of unsavory characters are bringing the reputation of the sector down, and I want to see them out. And I think having a national registration scheme where coaches and practitioners are asked to hold a license to practice, I think that's a really important thing for the reputation of our sector, and that's truly sealing the deal on professional. So that I'd like that to be my legacy. If my back holds out, Matthew, I'm going to stick it out.
Well, I'm sure your trainer will fix that one.
It's working, isn't it?
My last question: Escape Your Limits is about escaping what you believed is impossible and gone on to make possible. What is a memorable example of you escaping your own personal limits?
Oh, I didn't know you were going to ask me that. Okay. I kind of bought into if you see it, if you visualize it, it will happen thing, back in the day, and then feeling quite demoralized that it wasn't happening immediately when I was younger. Oh, well, I just saw it, so therefore it should happen. I should be a CEO immediately, and I'm a life coach. But actually, for me, showing some patience and deference and wanting to learn and not rushing and being good at what you are doing before you start to try and be good at something else is a real virtue. So I've kind of enjoyed that. It's easy for me to say now I'm this age, but I did write 3 things down when I was 26. And one was by the time I was 30, one by the time I was 40, one was by the time I was 50. And all 3 things have happened. I'm not going to tell you what they are, but one of them was to be a CEO. One of them was to be a head of this type of organisation in the sector that I love. And I guess the other one was jumping out of an aeroplane from 14,000 foot on my 50th birthday. That was not something I thought you'd ever see me do. With my dad at the front of the plane because he's a pilot. That was creepy. Probably, he's a great bloke and a great pilot. Everybody who used to fly with my dad, he was very safe, don't worry. But it was also slightly incentivized me to jump out, I guess, as well. So, I never thought I'd do that, Matt. That was just. Have you ever done it?
Did you enjoy it? I haven't. My brother did it, and he's a big, strong guy, and he said he would never do it again. So it sounded like it was quite scary. But what was the experience like for you?
Yeah. Going up to you have about 10 minutes training. Lie on the floor, be able to arch your back and do this, and lift your legs up, and try and hold that position the whole time. Nobody prepares you for when you jump out, you're actually going to do a somersault. You free fall a mile in a minute or something like that. So actually the anticipation was terrifying. The act itself, I just wanted to go straight back up. The buzz I got out of that free fall. But also, let's be totally honest, the relief I felt when we pulled that cord and this parachute came up was, okay, that's okay then. I didn't think I'd ever do that. But seeing is believing. I think going back to that sort of having a vision for yourself and backing yourself, I had lots of imposter syndrome moments in my career. But I wrote those 3 goals down. And I kept that piece of paper for a long, long time. And what it does is it takes your blinkers off. If you kind of try and plot a career when you're younger and say, I think I'll do it this way, and I'll stick it out, and you wait for it to happen because you've got this kind of linear version of it, you don't actually see opportunities. If you're sort of a little bit more circumspect and say, I'll be doing this by the time, I'll be doing that by the time, whatever, I have a vision for me, you actually see opportunities you wouldn't ordinarily look for. You think, well, that might get me there quicker, or that's an opportunity I should look into because it will broaden my knowledge, or it will give me a depth, or whatever it is. That breadth and width actually becomes a really important kind of portfolio when you get there. Do you know what I mean? It's not so linear and track because you're not assimilating skills and experiences as you go. With hindsight, I'm really glad I was able to do that. I'm really glad I sort of had the patience to do it. It sounds like my nieces say this, oh, you older generation, you'll say if you see it, believe it, it will happen. And I'm like, yeah, well, I was like you once and I didn't believe any of it. And I thought all of older people were talking cobblers. But you should look up to people who've done it and back yourself and believe yourself. And actually, I'd like to be your age now because opportunities are endless and people don't always stay in the same sector anymore. They move around, we're more transient and we add more value to ourselves and more kind of stock value. So when you do find something that you love, you've got a bit more about you. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if that sounds weak or a bit lame or a bit boring, but
no, not at all. Have you reset that now? You've achieved those 3. Like, have you done a 60, 70, and 80 version of that?
I've done a in my career one. I've kind of just explained them to you. Really, one is to leave a legacy of safety, and recognition. But the retirement thing is quite tough. It's a long way off. I'm not in any hurry to retire. I've got to set some goals there. I think at the moment, I don't know about you, I can't even think about it, because if I start thinking about retirement, then it becomes a reality, and I really want it to be a reality. I want to work for a long time and still bring my best and add stuff back to the sector. And yeah, I think as soon as I acknowledge it's there, then that visualization bonus that I have becomes a problem, because I'll just hurtle towards it, and I might start counting down. I don't know. I'm just trying not to have it in my sights at the minute. But I guess at some stage I'm going to have to, by the time I'm 80, I will have done something. I don't know what.
Well, I did an interview last week with someone, and he said when you can find where your purpose and your passion meet, and that that's something that you want to do for the rest of your life, that's kind of where you want to aim to get to. And I suppose you're probably not far off that at the moment, and it's trying to figure out what that, as opposed to retiring, what that next evolution, so you can continue, because you're obviously clearly love what you're doing, and it's trying to find how that can evolve into something that you can do for the rest of your life, really.
Yeah. I'd love to teach and lecture. I'd love to mentor younger people in our sector. I would really, really love to do that. I mean, I could do that until I'm pushing up the daisies, I expect, as long as I sort of maintain my competence and stay up to speed. But that I find that really quite satisfying, guiding and mentoring younger people.
Very
Be young, a little bit younger. Yeah. What about you? You're not much.
I'm still figuring it out. I did a podcast, as I said, it's not been released yet, but it's something I've been thinking about a lot. And because I love working, and I don't, like you, probably in a similar way, I don't want to think about retiring, because I'm like, well, what am I going to do? I think when you retire, not in all cases, but I know a lot of people I've met, whether they have been successful and they retire young, or whether they get older and retire, they seem to, in a lot of cases, lose their purpose, and it just becomes this kind of waiting room for when they check out. And then other people just find that purpose, and they just go on learning, exploring things right up until the end of their life. So I suppose for me, if I can find something where I'm driven, I'm excited, and every day I can continue to learn and grow, then why not? That I think that would be me. I don't look forward to there being a day where I'm like, okay, I'm retired now, and I'm going to go and do the garden. I don't think that's really my idea of a good good end of my life.
I wouldn't mind. I like a good hour in the garden, but I like that now. I wouldn't mind setting myself a target of playing golf twice a week, because I love golf, and I haven't really played it for 10 years, and I'm just too busy. It's a very time-consuming sport, isn't it? But my God, what a great sport! That's a real target. It's not very ambitious. It should just be a must. I must play golf twice a week. In fact, that's another reason why I need to keep my core strength up, because I can hit a ball, but my short game is terrible. My drives is pretty solid. Ex-hockey player, I guess. So I'm going to need to be fit and healthy enough just to get around 18 holes, 19.
There you go.
Yeah, get two a week in. Yeah.
Well, Tara, I'm gonna. I appreciate your time today. I'm gonna let you go and finish off your goals now. Thank you very much for the interesting conversation, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Matthew, and thanks very much to Escape too. Great talking to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you've got any value from it whatsoever, then please do us a favor, like, subscribe, tell somebody, and that will help us to be able to continue to do more of these and help you escape your own personal limits. Thanks for listening.